It's a pleasure to be here. You have our names here. My name is Giles Trendle, and you have our wonderful distinguished panelists' names here as well. So in order for sense of time, I think we'll get straight into it. We're talking today, the panel is about India in a multipolar world. We'll go on till around 11 o'clock. I try and get some audience questions in, maybe in the last 15 minutes. So if you do have any questions, I think Ava will have a roving microphone, and I will ask, please, short questions so we can get answers in. Okay, so multipolar world. What is a multipolar world? It's where power and influence is distributed among multiple countries or centers of influence, rather than just a single superpower or two superpowers as we had during the Cold War. So, Raghav, if I could come to you first. Firstly, do you agree that we are in a multipolar world? Let's get that out there first. And if you do agree, or whether you don't agree with it's a multipolar world, whichever world you think we're in, what is India? How is India going to benefit and obtain its objectives, its foreign policy, and its global objectives?
Well, Giles, first of all, thank you for the question. I do believe that we live in a multipolar world, and a world in which, rather than aligning with one bloc or one team, we also live in a world of multi-alignment. India, in particular, from the days of non-alignment, has now moved to the days of multi-alignment. And when I talk about multi-alignment, I mean India is one of the few countries today that can pick up the phone and speak to Washington and in the same breath speak to Moscow. It's the country that can speak to Kyiv as well as Moscow to ensure a safe passage for its students. It's primarily because India has, over the years, practiced an independent foreign policy, which is about India first. And whenever in this polarized world or multipolar world, whenever India is being pushed to a corner to choose a side, I believe the India of today is choosing Indian side or India in that sense. And while we would partner with the world, we would not wish to be the subordinate to anybody. And I think those days of relegating India to just a regional player or a country which will have to align with one bloc or the other out of compulsion and not out of choice are gone. Today, India, which is a country of 1.4 billion people, which has very recently become the most populous country of the world, that sits on a brilliant demographic dividend, which has become the fourth largest economy in terms of its nominal GDP. It's perhaps a significant power to reckon with.
Mm. And you're right. The strategy of non-alignment, of strategic autonomy that India has followed, being in a multipolar world, what are the challenges of that, and how can India get through those challenges? Because obviously you have the United States and Russia, but China, Brazil, many different countries rising up, and there may be complexities, there may be challenges, but how can India face those and get through them?
I think you're absolutely right. There's a Russia, there's a China, there's a US, there's the Middle East, there's Israel, there's Palestine. There are multiple poles. But to be honest, the way I look at India's foreign policy and India's diplomatic positioning, I think India today has become, and there is a phrase in Hindi that we use, is called Vishwamitra. Vishwamitra means the friend of the world. Vishwa means world, Mitra means friend. We become a friend of the world. We are partners with all, but we refuse to be pawns of anyone. And therefore, while we can buy affordable energy from Russia, we can also deeply engage with the US, the EU, the UK in particular, on clean energy, right? And none of these choices determine in any way how we will vote in the UN or abstain for voting. So I think this kind of strategic autonomy that India has achieved over the last few years not merely from an economic and social standpoint, but also from a diplomatic standpoint, comes from the fact that India has, in many ways, become the Vishwamitra, the friend of the world, and we therefore can engage with. And I don't think there are many countries, particularly belonging to the global south, that can boast to now speak to different poles in this multipolar world. I think India is perhaps the only textbook example of this.
Yes. So, Lord Simon, if I may come to you. Rina, I come to you next afterwards because we'll come down to the UK and India, but let's stay with the global just for the minute. You're a foreign office, ex-foreign office. You've been a diplomat in Germany and Israel. What do you think about the idea of a multipolar world and maintaining seemingly, well, relationships with seemingly contradictory powers? I mean, that's a challenge, but as Raghav said, if you can overcome that challenge, it's a very strong point in your favor.
Okay, thank you. I agree basically with everything that's been said so far, but I think it can be given a sharper focus or even a different focus. So multipolar world is how people are getting used to looking at the world right now. But another way to look at the world right now is that it is apolar. So as I look back at my career, I was 38 years a diplomat. At the beginning, it was a bipolar world between the Soviet Union and the United States. And then it was a unipolar world because the United States was clearly triumphant. And now we've got something else. A multipolar, that's convenient. That allows us to accommodate China, rising powers like India and Brazil. But maybe that doesn't capture the change. And perhaps the change is that nobody is in charge or no country is in charge. And so it's apolar. And all countries have to make their way between a lot of other powers, none of which is really driving events. The things that drive events, by my analysis, are forces like environmental change, climate change, which is everywhere, a pandemic that would drive things all over the world, and big business. And big business, the biggest business, really aren't aligned to states in the old-fashioned way. So perhaps, multipolar needs itself to be examined, and it would be useful for India to look at the world as one without any dominant powers. Now, my next remarks I offer humbly because I'm a British diplomat and we're talking about India. But it seems to me that all countries look at the world more or less in terms of concentric circles. But for India, I think this is most true and most important, that the chief concern of India is India. I mean, it is the biggest country in the world now by population. It is the fourth biggest economy. It is a very complicated country. It has more than enough at home to occupy its best mind. So the center of the circle is India itself. The next two are the countries, in my view, which India needs to pay most attention to. One is Pakistan and the other is China. They're neighbors. Now, Pratik gave us a very good introduction, but I'm afraid you got one very important fact wrong. You said that the terror attacks this spring were the worst in many decades. Well, I was the National Security Advisor of the UK in 2008, and I was supposed to visit India in November 2008 when there were a series of terror attacks in Mumbai. 175 people were killed in those attacks. I mention that both because people forget very quickly, but also there is a history of having to cope with very difficult bilateral issues. When I worked for Jack Straw in 2001 to 2003, India-Pakistan almost went to a nuclear confrontation. But India and Pakistan have managed that relationship, and the most important thing in foreign policy, I think, for India is to continue to achieve that. China, well, All around the world, there are border disputes, but between India and China, they are of a completely different scale, both in the East and the West. And the disputed areas are the size of decent-sized countries of the United Nations. So Akai Chin in the West is occupied by China, and Arunachal Pradesh in the East is an Indian state, but China claims this 32,000 square mile state. So there's a big issue with China, and it goes up and down. That needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
And the rest is
Yeah.
in the background. The rest comes later.
Okay.
So,
All right. Well, you've given us a good global context there. Thank you. So let's bring it. We're in the UK. Let's start bringing it down to the UK more. And Rina, over the years, you've been the co-chair of the Conservative Friends of India. Over the past years, how have you seen the UK-India relationship evolve?
Yes, I was co-chair for the last 5 years of Conservative Friends of India. I don't think it's what you'd call a sleepy time in the world nationally or even our political party. The UK-India relationship has changed, as Raghav has spoken. There are issues with the US and China. You've got turbulence in the Middle East and Europe. Democracy is not always the norm. The Western liberal order is under attack in places, and we're looking at economic protectionism in different countries. And countries are looking for new places to partner up with, new places to be strategically aligned with. And as Lord Simon has said, the first role of government is to do what's best for its nation. So the UK-India relationship has changed significantly over the last decade. You have a historic, somewhat complicated relationship, which is now, if you look at it through economics, two large economies, they have that in common, and you can see that culminating in the free trade agreement. You have two democracies, and you have a post-Brexit Britain that is looking with an Indo-Pacific tilt to find new strategic partners to fulfill its global Britain agenda. And you have an India which is growing in strength and influence in the global south. So you look at that relationship now, and what you have is, yes, a complicated historic colonial Commonwealth relationship, which has now become a strategic alliance between two equals, full of opportunity, full of good collaboration on global issues or in places where there is a need for global leadership. And I think we've seen that in action through COVID as well, with the vaccine collaboration. And we know that supply chains are also not always robust, and countries looking for more and more collaborations there. And I think what the UK-India has, which is, I think, its secret power, is a 1.8 million British Indians. Diaspora is a word I can't seem to say, is significant.
Yeah.
It is large, it is influential. And the conversation we're having on multipolarity, there are echoes of India's role in the world and the British-Indian journey in the UK, and how those may have been background conversations which are now very much in the forefront, very much strategic and very much influential.
And what about you are Conservative Party, or you were formerly co-chair of the Conservative Party Friends of India, and the political representation, particularly in the Conservative Party over the past years, going right up to the Prime Minister. How does that make you feel?
I'd like to tell you we were the largest affiliate group due to sparkling personalities, but I think British Indian representation gave us a good boost. I think it's important to say that, yes, the Conservative Party had a record number of high-profile British Indian cabinet ministers, and of course, Rishi as Prime Minister. That didn't happen overnight. That was a journey that was seeded by David Cameron, who was looking for a more diverse representation. So we saw that flourish with, Priti Patel, Alok Sharma, Suella Braverman, Claire Coutinho, and of course, Rishi as the culmination of that. For me, the Conservatives are no longer in government, and I think that while we are just dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff, we shouldn't ride back on that, and that should always be a proactive stance. We're a meritocracy to look for good British Indian representation. But I digress. What did that representation do? I think from a UK to India relationship perspective, Raghav would probably be better placed. What does it feel like when a British foreign minister is sitting in front of you? How does that feel different when it's the British Indian foreign minister? I would say that there would be probably a people-to-people relationship as well. Our British Indian minister would have a bit more understanding of India's aspirations, cultural nuances. I think that becomes more of a personal relationship as just a government to government. You have a massive boost in engagement from British Indians who, can now see that you're in a country where you could be Home Secretary or Prime Minister. You're probably more willing to put yourself forward. And with the 1.8 million economically active, educated, integrated, business owning, home owning population, they are more engaged as an electoral force. And that also then translates into electoral momentum. We saw that in Leicester East with the only gain at the last election with Shivani Raja. See it in places like Slough, in Harrow, where we see that that also translates into engagement. These are people who are also plugged into the British Indian community and having talks with the Indian government. That's an informal channel of cultural dialogue. It does great things. I will leave it there.
Well, let's
talk for a long time.
Let's put what you asked to Raghav. Raghav, how does it feel from when you're in India, when you have a British Foreign Secretary, British Prime Minister visiting who has Indian heritage? And a second element to that question is Rina was talking about the UK-India trade deal. How is that seen from the Indian side?
Look, first of all, I had the opportunity of spending some good quality time with Mr. Rishi Sunak 9 days ago when we were attending the same conference in South Korea in Seoul. And I had some fantastic conversations with him. I can certainly say that we, as Indians, we are extremely proud, and we take a lot of pride in the fact that there is been a person of Indian origin at the helm of affairs in the UK. In fact, as a matter of fact, I know his mother-in-law very, very well because she sits in the Indian Parliament in the same chamber as I do, Miss Sudha Murthy. But having said that, of course, it's a matter of pride, and I think much beyond just the symbolism of a ministerial makeup that has an Indian complexion in it. I think it's also to do with the fact that in the post-Brexit era, India, in many ways, has become an indispensable partner of the UK. And for us as India, as part of the the Indian administration, the government, the parliament, we feel that UK is an extremely critical ally that we just cannot do away with. So I feel it's a win-win situation, and that has effectively translated into a fantastic free trade agreement of 2025, which will go a long, long way in boosting bilateral trade, bilateral goods and services, etc. And not just the FTA, which has been in conversation for the last few weeks, ever since it's been announced. I think the collaborations done between India and the UK are just phenomenal in terms of defense capabilities, in terms of strengthening the the educational institutions, in terms of working on issues like technology, software, AI, so on and so forth. So, I mean, I quite frankly feel that India and UK is a partnership which many have termed as the living bridge, right? And this living bridge, notwithstanding, of course, the colonial history that's been there. I mean, if one were to just look ahead and not look into the past, I think it's a fantastic partnership which will go a long, long way.
Right, great. And going to the point about multipolarity, where does the UK sit in the multipolar view, let's say coming from New Delhi? Lord Simon talked about Pakistan and China as being big challenges. When you're looking at it from New Delhi, what are you seeing about the multipolar world, and where does the UK sit in all that?
Well, I think where does the UK sit is something for people like Lord Simon to answer. I mean, I can, of course, from an Indian standpoint, talk about, and since he mentioned about, the challenges that India has, and very recently there was an unfortunate, very, very unfortunate incident in Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir, I think it becomes very important that we highlight that at a forum like this in the UK, which is that, India's strategic autonomy in this multipolar world, as you put, is also reflected in the fact that in the aftermath of the most cowardly attack in Pahalgam, where 26 civilians were butchered, uh, India didn't go around town seeking consent to retaliate. India told its worthy partners in the world that, look, we are all for peace, but don't mistake our peacefulness for our weakness, right?
Mm.
And while we extend the hand of friendship, but if you indulge in misadventures, that hand of friendship can very quickly become the fist of retribution. And as a result, India responded. India responded in a non escalatory, precise, measured, calculated, swift response, where cross border strikes were made and terror infrastructure across the border, not civilians, not military bases, but terror infrastructure was brought down. I think this has become a new normal. And this underscores the fact, as I read it, that today cross border strikes and demolishing terror infrastructure in Pakistan is not the exception. It will be the expectation if Pakistan indulges in sponsoring, aiding, abetting terrorism within India. I mean, India and Pakistan, Giles, started their journey from the very same day, that fateful day in the year 1947 when the Britishers left India, the United India, right? We started the journey from the very same day. And look where we've come. India today has become the fourth largest economy. Pakistan today is in economic turmoil and in an institutional crisis. India today is known to export software, to export education, to export, agri products, dairy products, so on and so forth. Pakistan today is known to export only one thing: terrorism. India is investing in healthcare. India is investing in education. India is investing in science and technology, research and development. Pakistan is investing in only and only military and radicalization. I mean, at this global forum, Giles, permit me to say, and let me appeal to, the first world countries and the IMF in particular, that we should quite frankly have a relook the way we fund Pakistan. Why is the IMF giving bailouts to Pakistan one after another? Where is the money going? Is that money being invested in healthcare? Is that money being education? Is that money being invested in infrastructure? I personally feel that that money is going to funding nefarious activities and designs of the regime. So I think it's high time that the world realizes that lies and loans cannot go together. Diplomacy and duplicity of Pakistan cannot go together. Blood and water cannot flow together.
Okay.
And terror and tolerance cannot be together. And I'm not even part of the government. I speak that I'm an active part of the opposition, a pretty vocal member of the opposition. And yet, as an Indian on foreign soil, I say what every Indian, 1.4 billion Indians feel.
Yeah. There should be a roving mic. I will come to questions in a minute. No. I think Ava has it. But a couple of more questions here, very briefly. Lord Simon. So Raghav mentioned, the view from New Delhi. What's the view from London? The UK now, I think, is it the sixth largest economy in the world? It was overtaken some time ago by India. What's the view from the UK about a multipolar world with respect to India and the UK's relationship with India?
Well, India is a key partner. I was struck by something that Reena said when she said it's a relationship of equals, as though this was a thing. And of course it is, because there is equality of respect. But when you look at the content, we're very unequal countries. Because India is very much bigger than we are. India's economy is growing rapidly. And when we look at mid-century, India is going to be in the top 2 or 3 countries in the world, and the UK is going to go steadily down. So, you know, it's when the relationship is not, you know, is not just economic. The relationship is also historical, and the relationship is personal and cultural. So I think India features very large in British diplomatic calculations because we know a lot about each other. And I hope that the Brits can approach the relationship with some humility. I mean, one of the things that's in the blurb for this conference is about the unique relationship between the United Kingdom and India. And this is true, but nearly everything that's unique is kind of difficult when looked at from the British point of view. I mean, if we're being totally honest. So we need to be conscious and humble before that history, but not debilitated by that. We
Okay.
need to build for the future.
Very quickly, before we come to questions, okay, do you mind? I might address one of the questions first to you because it's kind of your turn to speak. But
I didn't click.
we have a mic here. So the first table here, we have a question from the lady in the first table.
Hello, my name is Mamta Rathor, and it's been very interesting listening to all of you on the panel. My question would be, first of all, Raghav Chadda, you spoke very well about India and how it's come up in the world and the relationships that we're having around the world with different countries. And I really think the British Asians, being second generation, third generation, have come a long way from our immigrant parents. I remember starting a business with my family, and we had to change our first names to get the first orders. I became Martha from Mumta. So we did get through.
And your question?
Feelings. And so I just feel we've come such a long way, and we are talking about relationships. And Lord Simon, you said we've got a great relationship, but yet the press from Britain is so divisive against India. Still, we have the Pahalgam. I'm sorry, some of my accent's not going to be correct as I'm British with a British accent. So Pahalgam scenario that we had, the British press gave a different view. It wasn't. It was quite biased actually and quite divisive. It didn't give the correct information, and I just feel the British press does that all the time. Especially.
So would you like to address the question to Lord Simon about this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, fortunately, I have nothing to do with the British press. But looking you in the eye, most foreign policy issues are treated in a similarly controversial way by the editorial teams in the British press. So as has already been mentioned, there is a conflict continuing in the Middle East. Both sides of that conflict hate how the British press is characterizing what they are doing and what is being done to them. So this is part and parcel of the United Kingdom. So my right back at you is you need to get your case out there. Because the British press is more fragmented than it used to be. So people can use other means, social media, new media, to counter a message which they think is false in the old-fashioned mainstream media.
Okay. Rena, would you like to?
A few things. You raised the living bridge, yes, and you raised the press. I think when Russia invaded Ukraine, a lot of parliamentarians would say to us as CF India, India's response is not robust enough. Why are they not doing this? Why are they not doing that? And we facilitated an interaction between the Indian High Commission and elected parliamentarians to explain the relationship that India has with Russia, to explain history, to explain that they were allies long before the different, where they buy arms from or where they buy oil from or energy from. It is there is a lot of information and we're not always getting the education we need from there. India is 1.5, I think, million people, different cultures, different ethnicities, different religions, different traditions. We are not one block of people. British Indians that you talk about, your experience as a British Indian, if you arrived here 40, 30, 20, 10 years ago, is fundamentally different from each other, as well as somebody who was born here 40, 20, 10. we have a very layered existence. Is it multipolar in its equivalence, which is what I was trying to say. There are echoes of what is happening. And the British Indians, 1.8 million, I think it is now in the UK. Yes, we are a living bridge. We are an economic bridge. We contribute greatly to the UK economy. We invest hugely in India. We are economically active. We spoke about home ownership, and we are culturally and traditionally maybe Indian. We have a stake in this society, and we are British in that way. We are a cultural bridge. Chicken tikka masala, something sort of Indian, very English, massively part of mainstream UK multiculturalism. And we are politically active. If you remember back to 2015, UK welcomes Modi. It was 60,000 people in Wembley Stadium with a newly elected Prime Minister Cameron and newly elected Prime Minister Modi. We are an engaged and influential group of people. We are a living cultural, economic, and political bridge.
Great. And a great benefit to the relationship and this country.
Very much echoes the wider debate that we're having. We are
Okay. So we have a question here, and then we have a question from the gentleman at the back. Please, could you ask a question and keep it your question short and sharp?
Just a very quick point to say that the British media continues to be very, very anti-India. They keep calling Modi a Hindu nationalist leader. I've never heard a European country being called a Christian nationalist leader. So British media really has to be put right. It is very pro-Pakistan, very anti-India. One question to Raghav is this. You are saying that we are Vishwamitra, friends of the world. The people of India would like to know why in sort of half a day or in 24 hours did we call off this conflict with Pakistan? Which pressure did you come down under? You are saying you don't come down under anybody's pressure. What was it? Because the people of India were really expecting that this should be one final result. We are going to have these terrorists again attacking us. So what kind of pressure did India come under? The problem is this, we are not being informed, and there are so many conspiracy theories. India has to become more open about this conflict.
Okay, Raghav, would you like to address that?
Okay. So as a member of parliament and as somebody who's heard all the government of India briefings very, very closely, I would love to believe the version of the Indian government, which is that it was the Pakistani establishment, the DGMO, the Director General of the Military Operations of Pakistan, that reached out to the Indian DGMO requesting, and if I may use the word, pleading for a ceasefire. India traditionally, sir, has never been an aggressor, but we are surely a protector. India, as I said, has, is booming from an economic standpoint, political standpoint, social standpoint. Pakistan, on the other hand, is a rogue nation. And I think Operation Sindoor, this kind of a military operation, has driven home the point that we wanted to drive home. I think it was only fair that the Indian establishment accepted the pleadings and the request of the Pakistanis, the DGMO of Pakistan. That is the version that I would like to believe, not the version that the Pakistani media wants to peddle. But having said that, I think what the feelings that you have is the feeling that I also have, and 1.4 billion people at home have the exact same feeling, which is, if I were to summarize, is that if you have a poisonous snake in your backyard, if you have a poisonous snake in your backyard, which is constantly attempting to bite you, it's better to break the fangs of the snake, right? I understand your feeling. That is precisely my feeling as well. But I think there are times when, our own ethos must take the better of us. That is, we are not aggressors, but protectors. And we will sure as hell respond quite aggressively, not in a measured and a controlled fashion like we did in Operation Sindoor, if Pakistan were to, continue with these misadventures.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm aware that we don't want to get too much into the Jammu Kashmir problem because we could be here for the next few hours. But obviously, it's a critical issue in the world today, especially in the light of what happened with the attack some
No,
weeks ago.
it's an international issue in the sense that Pakistan is not just exporting terror to India. Pakistan is exporting terror to multiple countries in the world. I mean, 9/11 in the US happened. London bombings on the 7th of July 2005 happened. A Danish embassy was attacked by the terror groups operating out of Pakistan. We saw the most dastardly murder of a Wall Street journalist, Daniel Pearl. I mean, Pakistan for the last
He was a colleague of mine.
he was a colleague of yours. I'm so sorry. Pakistan has for the longest time been aiding, abetting, sponsoring, engineering terror across the world, and it's not just limited to India. And therefore, I said that at a forum like this, it is important that not just India or the subcontinent, world as a whole should come together and boycott these countries or rogue nations that are funding and sponsoring terror activities.
We need to solve all the wars in the world. Yeah, with the way the world is going, and we need to work together. You meant
Does that speak
climate change and everything. There's so many issues that we need to resolve.
that
And
makes your argument, the discussion point, which is multipolarity, which is that there will be countries where you have strategic alliances, defense of your nation. There will be more and more partnerships that go out of shared interests and shared aims and shared strategic goals.
yes, absolutely. So we have room for one more question. There was a gentleman at the back. Very quick question, please, because we only have a few more minutes and we want to get the answers from the panel.
Thank you. Professor Atul Shah, City University of London. We're living in the Anthropocene, and the West has a profound moral and cultural crisis which has completely missed the social sciences. When will India export its wisdom to the world, and when will the West open its eyes and ears to the profoundly respectful and compassionate wisdom of India, which we call Dharma, because we cannot solve our global crises without transforming the social sciences and embracing the fact that each and every living being on the planet is worthy of respect and tolerance.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Raghav, would you like to? So the gentleman.
Lord Simon.
Well, I'd like both of your views.
This is going to be my last intervention. I will try to answer the question and I make one more observation. One is that cultural exchange already happens. You are quite right that is Dharma is not how your typical Westerner looks at the world, but it has a following. People do listen. People are interested in each other. I live and work in Cambridge. I am the Master of Christ's College, Cambridge. We are proud to be as international as we are, and India is a very important element in that international community. And my last point, which I think is very, very important, that we've heard a lot about the pain of the terror attacks. We feel that this has not been properly understood in the international community. There is unfinished business. But I have 2 points. One is the technical job achieved by diplomats in Delhi, but also in Islamabad, was remarkable, that they walked us back from the brink, and that is very important, and I think an achievement worth having and celebrating. But second, when India looks at the detail of what happened this spring, China was in the background. Pakistan, I do not think, could have done what it did unless there was very, very integrated Chinese support. So as you look into the future and look at developing future responses, that extra, I did, to my satisfaction. Thank you very much.
Final. The gentleman mentioned the Anthropocene challenge, and this maybe relates also to the biggest crisis, one of the biggest crises, the climate crisis. Now we have about 1 minute left, so I'm aware that I'd like to ask you about India's role in the development of green technology, green revolution. You have a wonderfully smart, educated population. the gentleman mentioned how ancient wisdom or old wisdoms can be found to have solutions. In very briefly, can you just explain what India is doing in terms of trying to adapt and move forward with green technology?
The government of India, in its last annual budget, had laid down a complete roadmap for green energy and green tech. India, not just the government alone, but with the corporates, is working closely to building several public-private partnerships in the field of green energy, which is the specific question that you've asked. I can certainly get into the details with him at a later point in time. But on your point of dharma and the world acknowledging the wisdom of India, I personally feel, sir, that when we talk about India becoming uh, a Vishwa Guru, which a lot of people in the ruling party speak about, I personally view this from the standpoint of dharma. And the way I view this is that Vishwa Guru, which essentially means the teacher of the world, is effectively teaching uh, empathy, solidarity, and dharma to the world. And India, in that sense, I hope, when we say will become the Vishwa Guru of the world, in my view, India should become the conscience keeper of the world. And that is how I would like to see my India from a global standpoint. It is not from the standpoint of mere supremacy in terms of our economic standing or the populace that we have, so on and so forth. I think it is from the point of strength, solidarity, service, and above all, as you've mentioned, dharma.
Okay, and any final quick comment?
India's ancient wisdom, you're seeing that in modern diplomacy through their multi-alignment strategy. And as Raghav has said, India is a Vishwa Guru. We are seeing that in action. It may not be preached or spoken about in a way that is obvious, but you're seeing leadership, whether it's the way the economy is growing and how they will grow the economy to the third largest. You're seeing that in innovation. You've seen it in their as a strategic alignment. You see that in their democracy, being a leader in the global south and an example to such. And I think what you're saying is already in action. It's happening, but it's through example.
Okay, Vishwa Guru is a good way to end. It was a word I learnt, but it seems like a very good policy in this day and age. But thank you to our panel, and thank you. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of your questions, but it's, as you see, a brief time, but I hope we covered quite a lot of interest. So thank you to Raghav, Reena, and Lord Simon.
Thank you very much.